This video is brought to you by Visible. Welcome to the future of phone service. Welcome, Mad Titans and Infinity Stone enthusiasts. This is Panel to Screen. Avengers Infinity War, tying together 10 years worth of film story. The movie is full of key moments and cool visuals ripped directly from the comics. So let's snap into it. Infinity War is based on multiple tales of Thanos, but primarily the Marvel crossover miniseries Infinity Gauntlet. The opening scene of the film introduces us to the disciples of Thanos, known collectively as the Black Order. After a brief cameo in the comic New Avengers, this team made its first true appearance in the 2013 crossover Infinity, which featured Thanos unleashing an attack on Earth while the Avengers were off in space trying to gain allies against aliens known as the Builders. The group is also sometimes called the Cull Obsidian in the comics, and the original lineup included Supergiant, who is nowhere to be seen in the movie. Interestingly, the movie renames Black Order member Black Dwarf as Cull Obsidian. It's not unusual in the movie to see this team standing over dead or defeated targets, much like the splash page from their own Black Order #1. The movie rips a major band-aid off pretty quickly. Thanos defeats the Hulk, then lifts the Green Goliath over his head. This is pretty similar to a famous cover image of Thanos doing the same thing to Spider-Man in Marvel 2-in-1 Annual #2. That issue was the final chapter of the first major story where Thanos fought Earth's heroes over the Infinity Stones, although back then, they were just called the Soul Gems. In the comics, Thanos has received godlike powers thanks to a cosmic cube, one of several artificially created objects that can make your thoughts reality. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the cube, also known as the Tesseract, is actually just the Space Stone more or less inside a Tupperware. When Thanos grabs the cube from Loki, some fans may recall a similar scene from Captain Marvel Volume 1, #29, published in 1973, or the more recent cover of Avengers Assemble #7. In the movie, Hulk crashes into the Sanctum Sanctorum of Doctor Strange, located in New York's Greenwich Village. He then turns back into Bruce Banner just in time to warn all that Thanos is on his way.
Thanos is coming.
In the comic book Infinity Gauntlet #1, a similar scene happened, except that it was the Silver Surfer who crashed into Strange's mansion. But for now, the Surfer only lives in those Fantastic Four movies starring a literally hot Captain America, so the Hulk was switched in. After learning Earth is in danger, Doctor Strange opens up a portal so he and Bruce Banner can recruit Tony Stark for the battle to come. Later on, they're joined by Spider-Man. In the comic book Infinity Gauntlet #3, Doctor Strange opens similar portals all over Earth, so he and Captain America could recruit more of Earth's heroes, starting with none other than Tony Stark, followed by Spider-Man. When Thanos' forces invade New York City, they use a large spacecraft that causes a panic in the streets. This seems pretty heavily borrowed from a scene in New Avengers #8 during the 2013 crossover Infinity. While the ship design is different, the rest of the scene is very familiar to the one in the movie, both visually and because both versions involve Ebony Maw looking for Doctor Strange. When Tony steps into battle, he summons up a new nanite-based suit of armor that grows out of his new arc reactor. This sequence is visually similar to Invincible Iron Man #25. This comic was the first appearance of Tony's bleeding edge suit. The comic book version of this armor was built by nanites that Tony stored in his own bones. Does that make it more of an exoskeleton than a suit? Is that a question for a different video? In the movie, Bruce Banner has performance anxiety, and as much as he'd like to, he can't call on the Hulk. At one point, the Hulk even gives a very clear RSVP to Bruce's invitation. This looks just like the famous cover of Incredible Hulk #241, published in 1978. It also resembles a famous story from Incredible Hulk 376, where Banner and his other personalities fought for control of their shared body, resulting in a chaotic partial transformation. During Infinity War, Spider-Man grabs onto a spaceship hurtling through the sky. Now, it might not be intentional, but this recalls one of his earliest adventures in Amazing Spider-Man #1 in 1963, when he helped save a runaway space capsule. The visuals are close enough, so you know what, we think it counts. Plus, old school Spider-Man art, it's just really fun to look at. Man, that's good. In the movie, the Guardians of the Galaxy rescue Thor from the cold void of space, toss him on a table, and discuss who he might be. The scene looks just like the famous 1964 comic where the Avengers found Captain America and revived him from suspended animation. Just, switch out the founding Avengers with a tree and a raccoon. When the movie shifts to the collector's home nowhere, we see him broken and humiliated on the ground, surrounded by his collection, with Thanos standing victoriously over him. A similar image can be found in the comic book miniseries Thanos Quest from 1990. The one thing the collector can't collect? A break. Remember when Thanos used the Reality Stone to turn Drax into building blocks and Mantis into a living Slinky? He did the same kind of torture to Nebula and his brother Eros in the original Infinity Gauntlet comic. You know, sometimes it's tough to bring a comic book page to life, so massive props to the effects team for making that look weird horrific and not weird campy. Speaking of torture, that bit where Ebony Maw shows Doctor Strange's creepy glass knife collection, it's very similar to how I met my first college roommate, but also really similar to another scene in New Avengers number 9 during the 2013 Infinity crossover, though Ebony uses different methods. In the original Infinity Gauntlet comic, Thanos amused himself by using his new godlike powers to place Nebula into a state of living death. In the Infinity War movie, a technological stasis field creates a similar effect by taking Nebula apart. She's held in midair at a different angle, but the basic idea and the trauma it delivers are pretty similar. And hey, at least she didn't get slinkied. When Gamora and Thanos find the Soul Stone's hiding place, they also find the Red Skull, just, kind of hanging out. Between his face and his hooded cloak, he actually looks a lot like a stand-in for Mistress Death, who was a constant presence in the Infinity Gauntlet comics. And since Death was a true love Thanos pined for, you gotta wonder, did he have kind of a crush on Red Skull in the MCU? I don't know, maybe the guy's got a type, a cloaky, spooky type. I get it. The invasion of Wakanda is one of the film's biggest sequences, and it borrows from a similar invasion made by Thanos' forces in New Avengers number 8 and 9. The comics reveal that these creatures, the Outriders, are genetically engineered to carry out their instructions or die in the process. Whenever a planet refused to offer a tribute to Thanos or was deemed a threat, the Outriders would wipe out the population. The land war between aliens and Wakanda could also pay homage to the secret invasion arc of Black Panther, in which the Wakandans battled a Skrull army. In the comics, Thor's hammer has been broken over a dozen times. The first time this happened, he reforged it himself using the resources of Pittsburgh. Yeah, Pittsburgh. I mean, it's not quite the same as heading off into space and having Peter Dinklage help you turn on a Star Forge, but I mean, guys, look at how metal that image is. The sheer energy and power of Jack Kirby and cosmic visionary Jim Starlin's artwork are both clearly evoked in Infinity War, when the God of Thunder unleashes the power of a star. One of the oldest tricks in Doctor Strange's book is this illusion that makes it look like you're in multiple places at once. He first used it in Strange Tales number 122, and we see him break it out on Thanos for a brief advantage in their battle on Titan. Spidey memorably shoots Thanos in the face. It's great, and while he ends up paying for it, it happens in the original Infinity Gauntlet comics as well. The battle on Titan is packed with references to the comics, including the climactic moon toss. In the original Infinity Gauntlet miniseries, Thanos didn't do any moonchucking himself, but the aliens known as the Celestials did throw several planets and moons at him, so we're counting it. One of the most gripping moments of the Infinity Gauntlet comics was Thanos' defeat of our champions, only to then see Captain America ready to stand against him no matter what. Visually, what happens in the movie is different, but the spirit is absolutely the same. Whether it's on the page or the big screen, Cap can do this all day. In the comic book universe, the gemstone on Vision's forehead isn't an Infinity Stone, it's just a piece of technology that helps him process and release energy. But whether it's a stone or a piece of tech, he gets ripped up either way. In the miniseries Infinity Gauntlet, Vision meets a similar fate at the hands of Thanos as he does in the movie. The snap wasn't just a game changer for the MCU, it is the most iconic visual of the Infinity Gauntlet comics, and it's probably the career highlight for the Mad Titan. It would have been weird to make the Infinity War movie and not include it. The movie ends post-snap, with Captain America and Tony Stark watching in horror as friends and colleagues fade away to ashes. Ironically, the original Infinity Gauntlet comic book saga was only beginning when Captain America and others suddenly saw half of the world's population vanish into thin air. Much like Infinity War the movie is the beginning of the end game. It's the beginning of Avengers Endgame. In the comics, the Infinity Gauntlet miniseries ended with reality restored and Thanos having realized he'd gone too far. The closing scene showed him resting at his space farm, silently contemplating everything that had happened and realizing godhood was not a prize worth having. A near identical visual closes Infinity War as the movie version of Thanos realizing he has finally achieved his goals despite the efforts of Earth's heroes. Visually similar scenes, but with massively different subtext. And that wraps it up for Panel to Screen. Thanks so much for walking through Infinity War with us and taking a look at some of the comics that inspired it. Most importantly, learn about the writers and artists that created these iconic moments, because without them, we'd have no Avengers to assemble. Thanks, guys. This video is brought to you by Visible. Welcome to the future of phone service.